Christ, okay. Let's just jump straight into it. Hello. It's been a while.
Can we?
Do you know where my phone is? I heard it buzz. Is it on the desk behind you? It is. It's under your phone. Lovely. Right, hello. Welcome back to A Drunk History of Middle-earth. It's been a long time. It's been a while.
Been a millennia.
It has been a while. There's been a lot happening, to be fair.
To you?
Yeah, my life has just been fucking topsy-turvy, crazy. Yeah, you're drinking Supplica that Alex got us, that you have exclusively drank, but...
Would you want to taste?
No, I don't drink recreationally.
Do you want to, but just even a sip?
Not really, no, because I was out yesterday. No,
For Alex?
no, I was out yesterday. I've still got some Polish lagers I've drank.
Well, that's on you. I haven't touched them, but I will. This is delicious. This has kept me going through these past few months.
Good.
Just a little shot of Supplica.
Yeah.
Everyone keeps saying, what are you talking about?
Becca's a mam drinker. Just whenever she thinks no one's looking, she goes into the utility room and drinks. Then comes back out.
No, I do not.
After crying in the toilet.
It takes me about 3 weeks to drink a bottle of wine.
Whatever. How have you been, anyway? So the last time you'll have heard of episode from us would have been about the beginning of June.
I'm sorry.
It's
all Chris's fault.
It is completely.
I've kept saying we need to record. But Chris keeps saying creative process. So
no, I've had to explain that these episodes don't just magically happen. That's not how things work. It's not just a case of, but basically I have changed jobs. I've been much more active in my local community. There's just been a lot of change, hasn't there? It's just been a lot of change.
For you?
Yes, for me.
Yeah. I've been the supportive wife.
You have, yeah. So I changed my jobs. I've taken on a more senior role now than what I previously was on, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, it's been a one. To be honest, I've had barely any time for Tolkien. I've completely missed the book club's Lord of the Rings read-along, and I helped organise it. Like with Alex, we sat down, did the scheduling and stuff, and then me and Alex, for various reasons, have just completely fucking missed most of it. She's doing more of it than me, but I joined in one discussion last week because I read in the chat someone mentioned magic, and in Tolkien, and I was like, oh, they're at that part of the book, so I jumped in. It was like the Siege of Gondor, and I was like, oh, and I just had a chat with people, and then afterwards I watched Jen and her husband Brady, I think. Sorry if I forgot your name, but I'm pretty sure it's Brady. They were running around Lord of the Rings online, just showing some of the locations from the book.
Nice.
Which is really cool. That was really nice, yeah.
You've not been honest. What have you been doing with your free time?
I've played...
Christopher.
I don't know what you mean. No, I'm
mining.
Yeah. Can you? I've been playing a lot of World of Warcraft. It's been bad. It's been pretty bad. It has. And then tonight reached another turning point. I was doing a fucking dungeon. Do you know what the thing is, right? Everybody wants a tank in an MMO, right? But tanks have to practice to get better. I'm willing to be a tank because I can also raid lead, right?
You'll never be as good of a tank as I was.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that, I try. You've got to get better being a tank. So I was in a mythic +8 for anybody who plays World of Warcraft. I'm a blood DK. I'm a blood death knight, right? I was in a mythic +8, and I said in the invitation, we just need 1 DPS because it was a guild group. There was 4 of us from the guild. We needed 1 DPS. I said, just be chill. I'm not we might deplete the key, but it's fine. It's my key. I don't care. Just be chill. And you've got this horrible thing. The World of Warcraft community is one of the worst online communities ever. They're so fucking toxic. Everybody expects everybody to be top tier, top rate, top guilds in the world tier.
Yeah.
Despite no matter how shit they are.
Well, everyone I seemed to play with was lovely to me. I kept falling off everything.
Yeah, that was because we were in a guild. They
were being kind to me.
We were in a guild at the time. But anyway, yeah, there's just this one person who was being an absolute fucking wanker. And I was like, just at the end of the dungeon where we had like one mob left to kill, and before I completed the dungeon, I kicked him out of the party. I don't know if it meant he wouldn't get any loot, but I fucking hope it did. Prick. He's just sending like really snide messages like, "Are you sure
Kick him!
Yeah,
Kick him!"
He was like, "Are you sure tanking's for you?" And I was like, "How about as a DPS, you let me get the aggro first before you start attacking everything." Anyway, right? Yes, I've been fucking addicted to World of Warcraft.
Anyway, moving on.
God, I can't get these fucking levels right. So yeah, being addicted to World of Warcraft. It's been really bad.
Moving on. Something in my life that's been very exciting recently has been someone quite close by to where we live has reached the grand age of 108, and that is the most exciting thing that's been going on in my life. And I think that she might have been a hobbit.
Yeah, do you want to add a bit of context as to why you find that interesting?
Because she was still living in her own home?
No, the bigger context is Becca's excited about a 108-year-old because Becca works in funeral care and a 108-year-old died, and it's the oldest person I think they've probably seen at that branch, right? Is that it?
Yeah, but that wasn't... Yeah. It was just genuinely 108. I was like, wow, fascinating. Yeah. It wasn't because of my background.
Yeah, but you've got to understand that the people who listen to this podcast have got no fucking context to that. They're just like, what, right?
I might have read it in a newspaper.
108 is impressive, but it's not something mentionable by itself. Like, a stranger is 108. I might as well get excited about, like, do you know that some people out there have red front doors?
Well, I thought that was a normal thing to say.
Without any fucking context, you just sound insane. Oh, there's a 108-year-old. And I made sure she didn't get to 100. Like, you're working funeral care. That is interesting. That is interesting. But you need to give people context.
Anyway.
These people don't know you. Despite the fact that some people have been messaging me on Instagram saying, "Oh, when are you coming back?" Like, fucking shut up. It's free.
You got me out of my bed funk. Yeah. I was laid on the bed.
Yeah, we weren't good. So I've spent days on this script because today we're going to talk about the Drúedain, which it's a very heavy topic. So I expect if this episode isn't about 2 hours long, I'd be quite surprised.
Beefy.
It's a lot, but I didn't want to break it up into a series because I didn't want our first episode back after a long break to be something you've got to wait for. So
don't want any cliffhangers.
I'd rather you just chew on this big fat ass nugget of knowledge.
God.
This big fucking.
I always have to lower the tone.
Knowledge, yeah. I want you to wallow in it like little piggies. I want you to be little podcast piggies listening to this in your ears. And
right,
going,
let's get started. Let's get
more,
started.
Right. So, today we're going to talk about the Drúedain, who are... they don't appear in the movies at all. Well, there's a couple of shots of some statues that might belong to them, I think. But they are a subset of humans that very little is known about. The Drúedain, also sometimes lumped in as the Folk of Haleth, who are a set of humans, they're an interesting group in Tolkien's world. They're also called the Woses, or the Wild Men of the Woods. And the Rohirrim gave them these last two names because, as humans, they live around the Rohan Gondor area in the Third Age and have got quite a lot to do with them. But if you're a clever clogs, like I can't think of that character from Peppa Pig. It's not Pedro Pony. No, it's not Pedro.
It's Edmund the elephant.
Edmund Elephant. I'm a clever clogs. If you're a clever clogs, you'll be able to tell that they are a subset of humans because they've got the word Edain in their name. And the Edain, of course, refers to the three houses of humans who lived in Beleriand in the First Age. So the term Edain is often used to refer to the three houses, but I don't think we've really covered them yet because when we did humans, we got up to basically they came to Beleriand, spoke to Finrod Felagund, and then I just kind of left it there. But that's one for the future because it seems to be very human centric at the moment. The last series was on Rohan. That really took it out of me, to be honest. Like I don't know. I've always done a lot of research for these episodes, but it just feels like humans, you've got to do that extra dive, and it's just there's just far more that you've got to sift through. Rather, so like with elves, like you've got the source of truth, which is like the Silmarillion, or like the published Silmarillion, and then you've got things that add to it. But then with humans, because we're so short-lived, like there's people with the same names, like who live thousands of years apart, like, and there's all these like human history is so tightly interwoven. It is a broad tapestry, and you've really got to pick the threads out.
Okay.
So yeah. Anyway, right. Let's cover off the names and stuff first, which I always love as the etymology. So the etymology all kind of goes around. I'm just going to mute Discord. So the etymology all revolves around them being wild men, or that's their whole thing. So Drúedain is Sindarin. Drú is a Sindarin form of the word Drúgu, which is what the Drúedain call themselves in their own language. So in their own language, they call themselves Drúgu. The singular is Drúg. But the Sindarin just adopted that and called them Drú. And then once they realised they were humans, because they didn't at first, they thought they were animals and beasts, like they did with the petty dwarves, they added Edain onto the end of it. So it's Drúedain, wild men.
Okay.
And because Tolkien's got a hard-on for elf twinks, obviously Sindarin's the most common one. So Drú means wars, which roughly means wild man in Old English, which comes to Old English via Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah.
And the Anglo-Saxon word is wasa, and means forlorn and neglected. And then which in turn came from the Old English element of the word wudu wasas, which means savage men of the woods. So the related term is also wude wasa, which means wild or neglected, which all comes back to wild. That's where it's the Anglo-Saxon, Old English, whatever, all means wild. And then, so some of the other names for them, I'm just going to go through them. Drú, Drúfolk, Drúath, Drúgu, Drúgfolk, Drúgs, Drúin, Pukulmen, Rogin, which is in Rohan, Rú, which is Quenya, Ruatani, which is Quenya, and Atani is there as well, which is the name that the Quenya give to humans. Wild men of the woods, Woses, and finally the Orcish name for them is Ogorhai. And I want you to hold on to that last one because we're going to revisit it in a minute. But I was crazy surprised at how much real world influence there was here. Now, I didn't know that. Like, I always think of them, they're kind of like cavemen, like Stig of the Dump type creatures, type humans. That's what they kind of are. It's like I always think of it almost as like Neanderthal, to like if there was Neanderthals in modern times type thing, where it was like a different branch.
Yeah.
But of course, we know that not Tolkien himself, but it wasn't a world where evolution happened. It was just everyone was created as those. So they are definitely still human. But in our world and medieval folklore, a Wudu Wasa was supposedly a race of Sasquatch-looking motherfuckers that lived in the woods all across mainland Europe and Britain. They all lived in the woods and the forest. And now, however, they're roughly equivalent to satyrs or fauns. Is that what you say? Satyrs? Satyrs?
Satire.
No, that's taking the piss. It's Satyr. I think it's a satyr. Show the mythological creature.
Right.
So they were roughly equivalent to satyrs or fauns or Sylvanus, who is the Roman god of woodlands. Okay. But the wood wars in mythology in Europe is very extensive and is very popular in heraldry and family crests. So I was looking, and it's like German, English, French, like a lot of coat of arms have like this weird hairy man creature there. And they're just dotted around and weaved around in the background.
Well, I've got something that's on topic. The only time I've heard woos, anything related, was from Winnie the Pooh. And it's heffalumps and woozles.
Oh.
And woozles are like Tigger's word for weasels.
Maybe.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, the thing is...
It's just a different
The thing is, it's very surprising. But when I was looking at heraldry, so yeah, like all across medieval times, like look at like heraldry and family crests and shit, A lot of them have got like hairy people in the background.
Have they?
There was a lot. There was a
Never
lot.
noticed.
Yeah, there was a lot. It was like my Da Vinci Code moment.
Like where people?
It was just they were very popular mythological
Hairy
figures.
men.
Yeah, but so we've got. I'm going to go through some names in our real world, in old mythology. So we're talking about the Old English roots of the word initially, but the mythic tale of the Wood Wars has related names in Old High German, Italian, medieval German, and then also in Swiss and Tyrol. And Tyrol apparently is an ancient mountainous region in mainland Europe, like near Switzerland. So some of these names in the Old High German was Schrat, Schrato, Scratcho, and then in Italy you had Salvan and Salvang, from the Latin Silvanus. For Switzerland and Tyrol, we had Fange, which I loved, and Fanke, which comes from the Latin fauna, which is the feminine version of the word fawn. So for added knowledge, I then naturally was like, why do we call animals fauna? I know I went right down a fucking rabbit hole of doing this.
What are you again?
I couldn't.
No, what do you call yourself? A philologist.
I've never called myself a philologist. And so for added knowledge, right, the reason we call particular animals of a time or a place the local fauna is two reasons. Partly because that's the goddess of earth and fertility, but the common usage of us saying, the flora and fauna comes from a guy called Carl Linnaeus, who was Swedish, who decided to categorize animals like this in his book Fauna Suecica from 1745. So thank you, Carl, you fucking knobhead. Anyway, carrying on the mythological links, right? So in medieval German, we then have a creature you might have heard of, the Lamia. You not heard of that? The demon that... Oh, right, okay. So
I've heard of it, but I wouldn't just recognise the word.
So for wild creatures that live in the woods, we've got Lamia and Holzmoya. So a Lamia is not just someone that lives in the woods and is a bit like a wild creature in the woods. It's also depicted as a demonic woman or a spirit who eats babies from Greek mythology. And this was one of those times where Zeus pumped a woman and Hera got mad at the fucking woman as opposed to that dickhead, which is just ridiculous. But if you've ever seen the film Drag Me to Hell, the bad guy in that is a Lamia. That's the demon.
That's obviously where I've heard it from.
Ah, right. Okay, fair enough. And then the Holzmoya is closer to Maya, which is obviously the Greco-Roman goddess of the earth and fertility, similar to Fauna. But then other mythological wild men is something anyone who's played The Witcher might know about this a bit, is the Leshy, or, because in the game there's also a Leshen, which is a god-like figure of Slavic wilderness who can change size and appearance at will. But he's of the forest, he's of the woods. So he misguides, a Leshy misguides wanderers and abducts children, carrying them away to his forest realm. He punishes people, but apparently he's not truly evil. He's more like a fae trickster, because he often takes away kids who are badly treated by their parents and takes them away to live in his forest realm with him. So that makes me think that there was like a super active pedo.
He's like a Peter Pan character.
Yeah, exactly. Except I think maybe the real world influence was just a massive pedo in the forest.
No, I think I'd rather see him as a Peter Pan.
Yeah, I'd rather see him as a fair creature than a BBC News presenter, to be honest. Now, we'll go on to something that we're through the looking glass here, people, as Milhouse from The Simpsons would say, because this is about to get mad. When I discovered this, I was quite shocked, because this links back to another episode of ours, and it's something crazy. So, according to some languages, which I'm going to talk about, the names used to describe wild men shows a very distinct link between the Roman god Orcus and the wild men of the woods. So it's said that the French language has its roots for the word ogre through descriptions of wild men who live in the woods and the Roman god Orcus, which makes me think now that if you describe an ogre as a grumpy bastard who lives in a swamp in a forest, that makes a lot of sense. So
Get out of my swamp.
exactly. So in Tyrol, when we were talking about their words for wild men, another word was orke, O-R-K-E, or lorke, or nerglin. And in Italy, they also called their wild men orco or huorco. So, the common literary origin of the term orc in our world today has a shared origin with the tale of the Drúedain, of the wild men of the woods.
Mm.
It's the description of a wild man who is uncouth and dangerous, which, when you put it like that, like, it's pretty interesting. And the elves thought that the Drúedain were a type of orc at first as well. So I'm pretty sure Tolkien was aware of this, because the orcish name for Drúedain is Ogre High, which we've just talked about. So that's almost certainly him pointing out that he can see the similarity there when they literally called them Ogre.
Yeah.
But even if not, like, thematically it's interesting because, like I mentioned, the elves didn't think much of the Drúedain until they knew their stance on the orcs. Yeah, it's just like, what the fuck? I've got a new chair and it's creaking, it's not good. So, as a final point, before we move back onto the mythology, but in the real world, the mythology of the Woses, that still survives today. So in English, it transformed through the years, and I was telling you about this the other day. There's a surname that's still quite common in Britain. So if you know anyone, or if you are listening to this and your last name is Woodhouse, or you know someone whose last name is Woodhouse, or even you might know Wardhouse, then that is our remnant of Woses. That's what that survives to today. So anyone who's called Woodhouse, their last name is literally like what wild men of the woods. That's what Woodhouse means. Which is just... So the surname originates from the 17th century with that spelling that we know of as like the modern spelling. But there's also another ancient family name, Wardhouse, which I mentioned, from a family in Norfolk. So anyone listening with those two surnames, you've got the Woses in you, which is interesting. So like your family name means
You're a wild man.
Yeah. And then in modern European languages, French now the term for wild man is homme sauvage. German is Wildermann, and in Italy it's Uomo Selvatico.
I don't know anyone called Homme Sauvage.
Homme Sauvage.
Oh, Homme Sauvage. That rings a bell. I definitely have went to school with someone called Homme Sauvage.
Oh.
Well,
Is that lad who moved back to Canada?
No, it's an absolute joke. Honest to God. Of course I don't know someone called Homme Sauvage.
But the person I've just mentioned was French. You knew a French person.
No, they weren't French at all.
Was he not? Was he? Oh, right. I thought he was French.
No.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. Right. Anyway. So, next time you see some old heraldry, have a look. Because in the background there might be some hairy little men. But anyway, right. Let's go back to Middle-earth. But I couldn't not include that. I thought that was fucking fascinating.
I feel like yesterday when you were drinking... Yeah. Everyone looked at you guys as a collective and probably thought the same. Wild, hairy men.
We were,
apart from Ross.
Yeah, we were in Head of Steam. It's because we're all quite chonkers as well. Like we're all so we're. I
didn't say anything about chonkers.
Right, I know. Well, we're all like broad. So anyway, right, we were in Head of Steam in Durham, and I thought it'd be funny to do that scene from Step Brothers. So Dave went to the toilet and I waited like a minute and I kicked the door open and I went, "Hi, my name's Jim. You want to suck my dick for money?" And David went to the bar and there was just a bloke in there having a piss.
Oh, God.
I hadn't seen that David like went in and then turned left instead of right to go to he went to the bar instead of the toilet. So some bloke was having a piss and I just kicked the door open and asked if he wanted to suck my dick. He said no.
Oh.
Nah.
Nah.
Coward.
I'm alright, thanks.
Fucking tease.
I'll have the more handsome ginger version.
You cheeky bitch. Right, so going back to Tolkien. Christopher Tolkien, and I'd never be so familiar as to call him Chrissy, noted that
Chrissy T.
Yeah, CT. Noted that his father was writing about Drúedain in the final years of his life. So, like, one of the last topics he was writing about was the Drúedain in his career. But there's also a similarity here to the Ents. And the way I mean that is, if you go back to our Ents episode, or you remember that episode, I pointed out that Tolkien, he famously, he said that Treebeard appeared while he was writing the chapter in Fangorn Forest. Like, he didn't exist until then. And then after that, he went back and retroactively put Ents back into his stories, like in the First Age and that. So then you've got the evolution of the story where when the dwarves kill Thingol for the Naugumir, the necklace, and Beren goes to fight them off, and some of the dwarves escape, like, you know, blah, 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 that none of them make it back because Ents kill them in the forest, right? Yeah. So you've got the same thing here with the Woses, is that Tolkien wrote that he went backwards in time after having them in Lord of the Rings and put them back into other stories, and there's also like their own kind of
where they couldn't do as much damage.
Well, no, it's just he's just sprinkling his characters throughout the history. That's all he's doing. Like, so yeah, he wrote about them in Lord of the Rings, but then he came back to them in the First Age and put them back in the First Age. But then, you know, in the published Silmarillion, there's no trace of them whatsoever. There's no trace of Drúedain at all in the published Silmarillion. So it's a very interesting part of the Legendarium, and there's not a lot. It's interesting because there's a lot of material there, but all of it's kind of like oblique references. Like, there's not a massive amount of just
concrete.
Yeah, the most that you'll find is in Unfinished Tales, which is a lot of evidence, but there's a lot more than there's a lot less in the Unfinished Tales than what I've got here, because I went through and combed through everything. So yeah, it's interesting. But we'll start with the physical appearance, which I always think's the best bit. So the Drúedain seem to be like a crossing between dwarves and humans. And on the surface, like, you might be tempted to think of them as similar to hobbits. They've got nothing to do with hobbits. They are distinct. There's no like relationship with hobbits. There's no kinship. It's just completely different.
I totally didn't jump to hobbits.
Yeah.
I was just thinking dirty chunk of men.
Fair enough.
Especially after after thinking about you lot.
Oh, lovely. So in Unfinished Tales, Christopher Tolkien says, "My father was at pains to emphasise the radical difference between the Drúedain and the hobbits. They were of quite different physical shape and appearance. The Drúedain were taller and of a heavier and stronger build. Their facial features were unlovely, judging by general human standards, and while the head hair of the hobbits was abundant, but close and curly, the Drúedain had only sparse and lank hair on their heads and none at all on their legs and feet. They were at times merry and gay like hobbits, but they had a grimmer side to their nature and could be sardonic and ruthless, and they had, or were credited with, strange or magical powers. They were, moreover, a frugal people, eating sparingly even in times of plenty, and drinking nothing but water. In some ways they resembled rather the dwarves, in build and stature and endurance, in their skill in carving stone, in the grim side of their character, and in their strange powers. But the magic skills with which dwarves were credited were quite different, and the dwarves were far grimmer and also long-lived, whereas the Drúedain were short-lived compared with other kinds of men." So we get quite a comprehensive description of what they were like.
I think I'm a Drúedain.
Yeah, well, you've got long legs, and we'll get to it in a little bit, where they talk more about their physical appearance. But, yeah, so despite the differences, though, they are explicitly human. They're definitely human. And they're recorded as accompanying humans who left Hildorian in the First Age of Middle-earth. So do you remember the origins of humans? However, some people say that the Drúedain were the first humans to make it to Middle-earth. Like, they make it west. Not into Beleriand, but definitely into the White Mountains, like crossing the first to cross the Anduin River So they were wanderers like long before the other humans turned up. But a few of the Drúedain did make it to Beleriand, and they came with the humans from the House of Haleth, who were the second tribe to get into Beleriand of humans and like show up. But most of them stayed in the White Mountains, which we know straddle Gondor and Rohan, which is historically where we encounter them the most in the story, especially in like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a good time for them there because a lot of times it happened where they were found by evil people, persecuted, or like the Rohirrim were dickheads to them and stuff like that. So we'll get to that when we talk about like the Second Age and beyond.
Just some friendly discrimination.
Yeah. So some historians in Gondor believe that the Drúedain were the first ones to come west, like I mentioned. But they said that the Drúedain were always a secretive and suspicious people who were persecuted, and they always just wanted to be left alone. So that led them to being the first ones to cross through Anduin and coming up and into Middle Earth.
They were just trying to escape everyone.
Yeah. They came from south of Mordor in their wandering, so they went like all over.
Yeah.
Started in the Far East, went far south, came back north, came west, like, you know.
Vibes are off.
Yeah, the vibes are off. So let's talk a bit about their culture and their skills and like the First Age, right? So, like I mentioned, if you haven't read Unfinished Tales, there's a whole section in there about the Drúedain. It's quite interesting. It's pretty cool. So I'd give that a read if you can. But they were always a people apart, right? That's what the Drúedain were, always a people apart. They hung out with the House of Haleth, but the House of Haleth, they were also always a people apart as well. So it was just like outcasts stick together type thing. So as I mentioned, the House of Haleth, second group to come across the mountains, second group to rock up and turn up with the elves, had a bit of a different relationship. They had no real leader, the House of Haleth. They were just like scattered tribes. But they were also different physically from other humans as well. So the Drúedain were their own thing, but the House of Haleth, they tended to be shorter and darker haired than other humans who came through as well.
So did the Drúedain have a leader?
Not really, no. I think they were all just friends. This is the House of Haleth I'm talking about, like.
I know, but you've said that about the House of Haleth, so
yeah, they were that similar.
I'm just curious, did the Drúedain not have a leader either?
Not really, but you'll see that there is some chieftains, but there's only two we know of, or perhaps one. So anyway, they had Drúedain with them when they first came into Beleriand, having met them and befriended them in the White Mountains when they were wandering. Some of them decided to come. They settled for a while in the south of Beleriand. They settled in the lands of Caranthea, I think, one of Feanor's sons. Didn't ask his permission, so I don't fucking need to ask you shit. But they were there as a loosely scattered people until they were attacked by orcs. Then what happened was a man from one of the tribes called Haldad he took leadership. He said, right, we need to band together. And he prepared the defences, and they started to hold out. He was killed, along with his son Haldar, by the orcs after rallying the people. However, his daughter Haleth then took up the command, and they held out for a week against the orcs, which was it's no small feat, until Caranthea came with his army and relieved them. He then said to Haleth, you can stay in my lands if you'll be like my subject. And she told him to fuck off. So Haleth she's very much like an Eowyn figure. She's like an Amazonian warrior woman, like a strong leader. So that's why they called the people of Haleth. It's because of her.
Okay.
So then they wandered, and King Thingol, who we know, gave them leave to settle in the forest of Brethil, as long as they defended the crossings of Teglin, which they did.
Was it his to give?
Yeah, he was the de facto ruler of Beleriand.
Okay.
Because remember, the Noldor came after their exile into Beleriand, but Thingol had always stayed there and declared himself king of Beleriand.
Okay.
Or the ruler of Beleriand. So the folk of Haleth, they were actually like the most numerous at the end of the First Age, because they just didn't go to war as much as the other two houses. They fought defensively whenever they could. They built defences, they built forts. They were like, nah, I don't want none of this shit. Along with Thingol as well. Thingol rarely went to war in the First Age. they'd only fight defensively or like in really great dire need, and that led to them meaning that a lot more of them lived. It wasn't all good though, because a lot of people still died. So the best way to think about it is that the folk of Haleth and the Drúedain live together in the same way that hobbits and big like humans live together in Bree. Like when it's a village where like everyone's mixed, but there's certain things for hobbits, certain things for humans, that type of thing. And that's not me saying that they're like hobbits, because again, I can't stress enough, they're not. They are a separate group of humans entirely. And according to Christopher, he says, sorry, just to clear it up, the folk of Haleth were odd, and Christopher goes to great pains to point this out. And he also talks about how strange the Drúedain were as well, right? So it's quite a long quote. The strangest of all the customs of the folk of Haleth was the presence among them of people of a wholly different kind, the like of which neither the Eldar in Beleriand nor the other Atani had ever seen before. They were not many, a few hundred maybe, living apart in families or small tribes, but in friendship as members of the same community. The folk of Haleth called them by the name Drúg, that being a word of their own language. To the eyes of elves and other men they were unlovely in their looks. They were stumpy, some 4 foot high, but very broad, with heavy buttocks and thick short legs. Their wide faces had deepest eyes with heavy brows and flat noses, and grew no hair below their eyebrows, except a few men, who were proud, a small tail of black hair in the midst of their chin. Their features were usually impassive, the most mobile being their wide mouths, and the movement of their wary eyes could not be observed, save from close at hand, for they were so black that the pupils could not be distinguished, but in anger they glowed red. Their voices were deep and guttural, but their laughter was a surprise. It was rich and rolling, and set all who heard it, elves or men, laughing too, for its pure merriment, untainted by scorn or malice. In peace they often laughed at work or play, when other men might sing. But they could be relentless enemies, and when once aroused, their red wrath was slow to cool, though it showed no sign save light in their eyes, for they fought in silence and did not exult victory, not even over orcs, the only creatures for whom their hatred was implacable. The Eldar called them Drúedain, admitting them to the rank of Atani, for they were much loved while they lasted. Alas, they were not long-lived, and they were ever few in number, and their losses were heavy in their feud with the orcs, who turned their hatred and delighted to capture and torture them. When the victories of Morgoth destroyed all the realms and strongholds of elves and men in Beleriand, it's said that they dwindled to a few families, mostly of women and children, some of whom came to the last refuge at the mouth of Sirion. That's pretty dire, like, that they were reduced to that number in Beleriand. Just a couple of families. But first of all...
What? I'm confused why in one description they have longer legs.
No, I said you've got longer legs, because you said you're like a Drúedain.
Oh, right, okay. I'm certainly not like a Drúedain then.
No. I'm more like a Drúedain than you. Except for...
With your thick buttocks.
My thick buttocks. My stubby legs. My massive cock.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Just kidding. Right. First of all, fuck the elves for thinking they get to decide who's a member of the human race and who isn't. So, fuck them. Fucking dickheads. Oh, we've decided you're a human. You don't decide shit. You fucking punks. Fucking decide to stop Fëanor, dickhead.
They just had a lot of time on their hands.
Yeah, fucking twinks. Right, so the second point is the last bit is pretty brutal, right? They already had a small population that was decimated further. Like the orcs and the Drúedain really fucking hate each other. Like the orcs and the elves. Or the orcs and the dwarves.
Or the orcs in any other race.
Yeah. You orcs surely are a contentious people. You've just made an enemy for life. However, so with the Drúedain, it said that at the end of the first stage, the last few survivors were permitted to sail across the sea, but we'll get there when we talk about Numenor. So the Drúedain, though, they had a particular set of skills. Would you like to hear about them?
No, I think I'll pass.
All right then. Right, thanks everyone. Catch
Good
you next
night.
time. So the Drúedain were incredibly skilled at a few things, right? Two things that stand out in particular are tracking and knowing plants. And knowing plants, it said that they weren't taught by the elves, but that their knowledge almost rivaled the elves in terms of knowledge.
Herbology.
Like things that grow. They could turn up to a place to live, and within a very short time frame, they were able to determine all the flora and fauna that lived there. Like they knew every single plant. They'd be able to tell from a smell whether something was like a plant you could eat, or like what was dangerous, which is pretty cool.
Nothing like you then.
No, fuck all like me. So in terms of tracking, they were able to follow the scent of orcs better than sight. Like they could smell, they could like hunt by smell. Except through running water, that would unless an orc went through running water, they'd be able to track him for weeks. And it said that they could smell an orc further away than a normal human would be able to see them, that's really fucking impressive.
Yeah.
And they taught everyone these skills freely, but no one was ever able to match them in it. Like they teach you as much as you wanted, but like nobody could match them. They did have their own written language once they'd met elves, just like other humans, where everybody got a system of writing, but they only used it for simple signs, markers, and warnings. Which was just very, very.
I was going to say, how accessible was paper really at this point?
No, they
just carve like something on a tree.
Well, funnily enough, yeah, because my next line is they were quite fond of painting flat surfaces like cave walls or wooden boards. And they were also good at carving wood and stone. So what they do is they had a very particular talent for getting pigments, like crushing up flowers and shit, and they use that to draw. But carving is where they really shined, and this is where we're going to talk about some of the magic, because they could create images of animals and humans that were so lifelike it was hardly to be believed. So for their amusement, like their joke, they used to carve life-sized orcs and put them at the borders of their lands, with an orc running away in fear from the place. So, like, at their border, they put a carving of an orc running the other way as a warning, like, there's terror here for the orcs. And it was kind of like, it was like a half joke, half warning. You know, it was like they're doing it for their own amusement, but it was a very serious warning. But they had a special ability for making images of themselves. And I'm going to use the term Pukelmen, or watchstones. They're interchangeable, but the Pukelmen is actually quite a specific reference to the statues that were at Dunharrow, which is the scary place in Rohan. In actually, so if I say watchstones or I say Pukelmen, it's the same thing. I'm talking about the same statues. So the Drúedain would create these Pukelmen, which were far larger than life. And they would be placed at the beginning of paths or the turning points in the woods, and they'd call them watchstones. They were great images of the Drúedain themselves, but they were often carved as squatting on dead orcs. And this was the first recorded history of humanity of teabagging your enemies. And we'd see this behaviour thousands of years later in games like Halo and Call of Duty. So they were the first recorded teabaggers in history. And
wow.
The orcs, Tolkien was ahead of his time. The orcs fucking hated these things. They really hated these statues, right? It would fill them with absolute dread. So orcs seem to think that the malice of the Ogorchai was filled in these stones.
They
right?
didn't like Drúedain bollocks in their mouths.
They hated it. They hated it to the point that they would be so scared and so they wouldn't even try to destroy them. Like, it would be easier to get a tiger into a bath than to get an orc to go near a stone like that. Like, they really were scared of them. And it's interesting because they do have some power, which we'll see in a minute, but there's also another power that the Drúedain are known for, which is the complete lack as a race of ADHD. Not a single one of them had it. because they were able to sit in absolute stillness and silence for days at a time. Hyper-focused on one task. No lists, no piles, just straight fucking... Do you know what, weirdly enough, right, I was reading this, and then in the news, there's this trend at the moment called raw dogging reality, where people will sit on an airplane for the longest journey they can and do
seen that.
So funnily enough, I was writing about these, and then it's in the news about people raw dogging flights, and that's what... So the Drúedain would just fucking raw dog everything. So what they do is they'd sit and they'd think, or they'd observe so intensely that they became indistinguishable from statues. So they could sit for days at a time in complete stillness.
Meditation.
Yeah, and they were, and if they were watching, they wouldn't blink, or it looked like their eyes were closed, but like they nothing would escape their sight. Like, and they could become like living statues themselves there, because if something evil passed their way, they'd emit such a shrill whistle that it would physically hurt you if you were close enough, but it could be heard from miles away as well. Like, so that was what they used as they used themselves as sentries,
right? And
they imbued their stones with these powers as well, like these statues. But sometimes they'd sit and do it to go on guard. They'd sit, or sometimes they'd sit and reminisce. Sorry. So, like, one example, if someone died, like, they'd sit and think about that person and just go over all their memories with them, and they'd sit there for days like that and like joy of their lives, you know, like, and they'd like enjoy that. But sometimes they did it in grief and sorrow, and sometimes they enjoy it. It was a skill for all occasions. Like, there was loads of occasions where they could sit and go into like these deep meditative trances.
I'd love to be left alone like that.
It's fucking awesome, right? So there's a hilarious story in Unfinished Tales, which I can read now because it's so short, but it's about one of these times the Drúedain did that. It says, on a time, one of the more skilled in stone carving among the Drúgs made an image of his father who had died, and he set it up by a pathway near to their dwelling. Then he sat down beside it and passed into a deep silence of recollection. It chanced that not long after, a forester came by on a journey to a distant village, and seeing two Drúgs, he bowed and wished them a good day, but he received no answer, and he stood for some time in surprise, looking closely at them. Then he went on his way, saying to himself, "Great skill have they in stonework, but I have never seen any more lifelike." 3 days later, he returned, and being very weary, he sat down and propped his back against one of the figures. His cloak he cast about its shoulders to dry, for it had been raining, but the sun was now shining hot. There he fell asleep, but after a while he was wakened by a voice from the figure behind him. "I hope you are rested," it said. "But if you wish for more sleep, I beg you move to the other one. He will never need to stretch his legs again, and I find your cloak too hot in the sun." How fucking cool is that?
That's nice.
That's pretty, like, yeah, but like the most useful application for this, I think, was like being a sentry. And in Lord of the Rings, the Drúedain we meet is Gan Buri Gan, which means Gan, son of Gan. And he said that they would watch and scout, and that's how they'd be useful to the Rohirrim against the orcs, and that they'd find pathways for them. And
they had the
like
stamina.
Yeah. So they were being able to stand utterly still, but their presence would be felt. So when they did this thing and they stood guard, though, they could make their presence felt through like intense. Like, if you weren't meant to be there, you would have this horrible creeping sense of dread, like malice on you, like, you know, when you're being watched, like that times 1,000, so that most people would steer clear of their areas because they were just so intimidated by something they couldn't see. But if you happen to be evil and you happen to press on past all this, then they'd admit that whistle, that shriek that we talked about. Very effective warning systems. So it's no surprise then that in the first age, the folk of Haleth believed that the statues of the Drúedain were magical and made good watchers. Like, they believe that the statues themselves made good watchers. Which leads me to one of the sparkers for this, which was the most interesting, like, quote-unquote display of magic in the Legendarium. So magic in air quotes because, the topic of magic in Tolkien is very complex. And it's probably one we're going to tackle soon, I think. Probably next is the nature of magic. But there isn't it in fucking typical Tolkien. There is an entire story contained within some notes called The Faithful Stone, which I've recreated to be more brief here, but if you want to read the full thing, it's in Unfinished Tales. But shall I tell you a story about a magical statue?
Yes, please.
So, the story goes that there was a Droog called Agan, one of the Drúedain, the singular name for themselves being Droog, which I've covered. Agan was great friends with Barak, who was a forester. Might even be the same forester in Drúedain we've just mentioned in the funny story about the cloak. Anyway, everyone in Barak's family loved Agan, and he kept them safe from orcs by watching at night because they all lived in the forest together. However, one day, Agan had to leave and go help his brother because his brother had been poisoned by an orc arrow. Barak and his family were afraid. Kids were crying, the wife was crying, Barak was sad because orcs had been seen in the area. So Agan told Barak not to worry, and he took him and showed him a watchstone he'd made and hidden in the bushes near Barak's house and said, "He'll watch over you." So Agan put his hand on it for a long time in silence, and he finally told Barak that now it contained some of his powers and it would keep them from harm. And so he left, right? 3 days passed, and then on the third night, Barak woke from a sleep where he'd heard a shrill whistle. But only he seemed to have heard it because his family was still asleep. So he jumped up and went to the window, and that's when he saw that 2 orcs were putting branches up against the side of his house and were trying to strike a flame to set his house on fire. Barak was scared and he was too slow to get his bow. But just as the fire caught and the flames leapt up, Barak saw a Droog silhouette come up behind the orcs and kill one of them with a single punch. The other orc ran away, and so the Drúedain stuck his bare feet into the fire, scattering the flames and stomping them out, saving Barak's family.
Aww.
So Barak unlocked the door as fast as he could and he went to help the Drúedain. When he got outside, it was gone. All that was left was a dead orc in the ashes. Right? So after comforting his family, Barak goes out as soon as it's light, tries to find the Drúedain, but he can't. He's gone. Can't thank him. But he's also gutted to see that it looks like the orcs had destroyed or stolen the watchstone in the middle of the night. So he knew that he'd have to be the watchman that night. But as luck would have it, Agan comes back that day. And Agan's wearing tough boots that the Drúedain would wear if they had to cross difficult country. But he was tired, but he was smiling because he'd been in time to save his brother's life. So it was good. So Barak told him what had happened, that the watchstone had been stolen by orcs and everything that had happened. But Agan said, just hang on a minute, and went off to look. Eventually he comes back and he leads Barak to the edge of the clearing, where in a thicket, the watchstone was there. There was something quite different about it. For one, it was now sitting on a dead orc. And for another thing, its legs were black and cracked and one of the feet had fallen off and was laid next to it. Agan said that he did what he could, sadly, but it was better that the watchstone had trampled out the fire than if he'd have done it. So then Agan took his boots off, and Barak saw that his legs and feet were blistered and covered in bandages. And Agan explained that he just woke up like that this morning. And he tells Barak, "Alas, if some power passes from you to a thing that you have made, then you must take a share in its hurts." And that is the story of the Faithful Stone, of a good friendship between a Drúedain and...
That's the best story I've heard for 2 months.
It's good. It's nice, isn't it? It's a good little story of friendship. But do you know what's interesting here is that I didn't clock on until afterwards. So this, I think, is one of the only other recorded instances of the relationship that Sauron has with the One Ring. The Watchstone was imbued with the powers of its maker, and when it was destroyed, it affected the maker as well. So we see that with Sauron on a much bigger scale, that he pours too much of himself into the ring, and when the ring's destroyed, he's destroyed. Whereas, Agan got away with
at least his foot didn't fall off.
Yeah, So I think maybe apart from like things like Gandalf like flashing
A cheeky nut.
like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Is that Gandalf flashing lights? Do you know when he rides out against the Nazgul and flashes the light at them on the fields of Pelennor? Do you know when Faramir is coming back on his horse and he's being chased by the Nazgul?
Yeah.
Or when the Witch King breaks the doors of Minas Tirith, which is in the books. I think apart from that, this, outside of elves and Valar and Maiar and shit, this might be the most overtly magical thing in the Legendarium. I think, like, outside of like all the First Age bullshit and Rings of Power stuff.
What about the not the werewolves? The what's the guy called that collects the honey? The bear.
Oh, Beorn.
Beorn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's very magical, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, he's a skin changer. That's the Hobbit, though, which is a little bit murky because... No, you're right, though. No, you are right, but... Yeah, the Hobbit does have much more overtly magical stuff because it was like a children's story first, wasn't it? But yeah, good point though. Yeah.
You're trying to say I'm a child?
No. There's not much else in the First Age to talk about except the Drúedain. So in the story, The Children of Húrin, there is a character called Sador, who is an old man who like serves the family of Húrin, and he's a friend to Túrin when Túrin's a young boy, and Tolkien was supposedly planning to rewrite Sador to be one of the Drúedain, but didn't get around to it before he died. Thankfully, he didn't. I'm glad he left him alone, because nobody should ever be fucking involved with Túrin Turambar. He's an absolute fucking hot mess of a person. He's just horrible. So I'm glad nobody was involved. No Drúedain were hurt in the making of that story. So that's it for the First Age. In the Second Age, this is very short. Short enough that we've only really got like one footnote to go off. So there's really not much to know about the Drúedain. But the Drúedain, essentially, that were left alive at the end of the First Age, were permitted to sail with the rest of the Edain to Númenor, and they were fine as long as Númenor was, but they saw further ahead than the Númenorians, and they started to get a bad feeling when Númenor was on the decline, and they started to leave. The last ones to leave the island were just as Sauron was brought there. They were like, fuck this, I'm out, vibes are off, have a good day, and left. When Sauron was brought as like a quote-unquote prisoner to Númenor, which we'll cover at some point. But the footnote is as follows. In the annals of Númenor, it is said of this remnant, of who survived the First Age, was permitted to sail over the sea with the Etani, and in the peace of the new land throve and increased again, but took no more part in war, for they dreaded the sea. What happened to them later is only recorded in one of the few legends that survived the downfall, the story of the first sailing of the Númenorians back to Middle-earth, known as the Mariner's Wife. In a copy of this written and preserved in Gondor, there is a note by the scribe on a passage in which the Drúedain in the household of King Aldarion the Mariner are mentioned. It relates that the Drúedain, who were ever noted for their strange foresight, were disturbed to hear of Aldarion's voyages, foreboding that evil would come of them, and begged him to go no more. But if anybody who knows that story knows that was a fucking waste of time. What a pig-headed bastard. But they did not succeed, since neither his father nor his wife could prevail on him to change his courses, and the Drúedain departed in distress. From that time onward, the Drúedain of Númenor became restless, and despite their fear of the sea, one by one, or in twos and threes, they would beg for passages in the great ships that sailed to the northwestern shores of Middle-earth. If any asked, "Why would you go, and whither?" they answered, "The great isle no longer feels sure under our feet, and we wish to return to the lands whence we came." Thus their numbers dwindled again slowly through the long years, and none were left when Elendil escaped the downfall. The last had fled the land when Sauron was brought to it. And then it goes to an author's note. There is no trace, either in the materials relating to the story of Aldarion and Arendis or elsewhere, of the presence of Drúedain in Númenor, apart from the foregoing, save for a detached note which says that the Edain who were at the end of the War of the Jewels sailed over the sea at Númenor, contained few remnants of the folk of the Haleth, and the very few Drúedain that accompanied them died out long before the downfall. So it's basically saying there was no Drúedain, one way or the other, left on Númenor at the end of the Second Age. But it is said, unfortunately, it's not quite just like, yay, they got out. In the Second Age, it said that the Drúedain of the White Mountains were persecuted quite heavily and driven from their homes by wicked tall men from the east. So these either would be humans who still worshipped Melkor from the Hildorian days, or men who were dominated by Sauron, but you still, Sauron worships Melkor, so you're still getting there by the same route, doesn't matter. It's much of a muchness. Either way, they were having a shit time. When they then, because of all this, they congregated at the two main dwellings, the Drúedain Forest and the Drúedain Iar. And it was during the Second Age that the Númenóreans began to deforest most of Eriador, which I think I've mentioned in the end episodes, that there used to be a massive forest that went across most of Middle-earth. And that was like Fangorn. You could go from like the Shire to the edge of Fangorn Forest essentially without leaving the forest. But the people who so when this deforestation happened, the people who would later become known as the Dunlendings tried to fight the Númenóreans, but lost pretty badly, and they had to flee. But they would not cross the River Isen because the Drúedain were on the other side, and at this point they already had a reputation for just wanting to be left alone. And a lot of people misinterpret that as just like being really fucking scared of them.
Yeah.
So the Dunlendings, who were arseholes anyway for Rohan for most of their history, left them alone. That was like their hard border, was that they wouldn't cross the river because the Drúedain were on the other side. They wouldn't go further north again because the Dúnedain were there. And so at a certain point they probably just went east and started fucking with Rohan. But that was it for the Second Age. Should we have a look at the Third Age?
Mm-hmm.
They could be found in a few places in the Third Age. Actually, there's some scattered notes from Tolkien in his writings that some tribes of the Drúedain or humans very similar to them, which is probably just going to be Drúedain. I don't think there's any other groups that match their description. They lived in the marshlands between the mouths of the River Greyflood, known as the Gwathlo in Sindarin, which just means Greyflood, and the River Isen. And there's a quote that they were known to be fishers and fowlers, but akin in race and speech to the Drúedain of the Woods of Anorion. The Woods of Anorion being the Drúedain Forest, which is north of Minas Tirith, on the road between Rohan and Gondor. It's a major region, like Anorion's a major region, and it's where Minas Tirith is. But the Drúedain Forest is in Sindarin is called Tawa in Drúedain, which means Forest of the Drúedain, was a heavily wooded pine forest located north of Minas Tirith. It was around the north edge of the forest was the Great Road that connected Gondor and Rohan. And in the south of the forest, you're going to see some extremely disturbing behaviour from me with the amount of research I've done on this. The long abandoned road to the Stone Wain Valley. So these two roads are important during the War of the Ring, right? The North Road was blocked by orcs purposefully. They dug trenches so that Rohan couldn't get to Gondor in time. Because do you remember like the march of the ride of the Rohirrim?
Yeah.
We're in the Royal Albert Hall, and I was like, yeah, that bit. So that was the orcs were there to prevent Theoden from getting to Gondor in time.
Yeah.
All was looked to be lost, except the Drúedain's lead and their leader, Gan-Burigan, showed up and helped them, leading them through the Drúedain forest to that forgotten road to the south through a hidden and forgotten valley, allowing them to get to Pelennor Fields and break the siege. So, as I mentioned before, Gan-Burigan in Drúedain means Gan, son of Gan, and it's one of the few words that we know of their language, another one being Orc, which in their language is Gorgun. So, I've mentioned that the Drúedain were a persecuted people.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to give you an extract of a conversation between Gan-Burigan, the leader, and Theoden and Eomer, and he offers to help them. "Let Gan-Burigan finish," said the wild man. "More than one road he knows. He will lead you by road where no pits are, no Gorgon walk, only wild men and beasts. Many paths were made when Stonehouse folk were stronger. They carved hills as hunters carve beast flesh. Wild men think they ate stone for food. They went through Drúedain to Rimmon with great wains. They go no longer. Road is forgotten, but not by wild men. Over hill and behind hill it lies still under grass and tree. There behind Rimmon and down to Din, and back at the end to Horseman's Road. Wild men will show you that road. Then you will kill Gorgun and drive away Bad Dark with bright iron, and wild men can go back to sleep in the wild woods. Aymer and the king spoke together in their own tongue. At length Theoden turned to the wild man. We will receive your offer, he said, for though they leave a host of foes behind, what matter? If the stone city falls, then we shall have no returning. If it is saved, then the Orc host itself will be cut off. If you are faithful, Gan Burigan, then we will give you rich reward, and you shall have the friendship of the Mark forever. Dead men are not friends to living men, and give them no gifts, said the wild man. But if you live after the darkness, then leave wild men alone in the woods, and do not hunt them like beasts any more. Gan Burigan will not lead you into trap. He will go himself with father of horsemen, and if he leads you wrong, you will kill him. To offer help and say, please stop hunting us, it's just fucking wild. Like, there's still people in fucking Rohan hunting. Like, that's the implication to me here, is that, like, anytime they're seen, they're hunted. It's just like, what the fuck? Like, that's just so fucking barbaric, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just like, what the fuck? Right, you ready to take a cliff dive into some... This is possibly the most insignificant deep dive I've ever done.
Go on, then.
There was a Stone Wain Valley we mentioned. That's where the hidden road is that allows them to get to Pelennor.
Yeah.
I went on a fucking journey. I went on a journey for this one. The Stone Wain Valley is where the hidden road was, and it was made by the men of Gondor, so at an earliest guess, early Third Age, because it went from the quarry. It went from a quarry at Rimmon to where Minas Tirith was built, known at the time as Minas Anor. The road was 4 horses wide and very straight, used as a route between the quarries of the mountain Min Rimmon, one of the mountains that's also got one of the Gondorian beacons on it, and going all the way to the northwest of the Ramas Echo, which was the great wall that surrounds Minas Tirith. Min Rimmon is one of those where the meaning's lost, so it just means mounts, peak something. So I'd like peak anal play. I don't know, like, who knows, like, you know, I'm about to get my rim on. You know, like, you just climb to the top and there's just like 6 people bent over with their arse cheeks spread. But frustratingly, Tolkien doesn't tell us for sure what type of stone's being quarried, but I went on a fucking journey and I can give us a guess. I think it's marble. Maybe some granite, but I think it's marble mainly. Possibly travertine, which is a type of limestone, but I think marble.
The path.
A type of travertine, which is a type of limestone.
This is what material the path is made from?
No, this is what the quarry was for.
Right, okay.
So my rationale, right, for marble is that Gondor is roughly equivalent to ancient Constantinople. Tolkien said this himself in a letter to Milton Waldman, which was like the big letter 131.
You're such a fucking nerd.
Yep. So we have, right, a massive city, a massive ancient city with impregnable walls being the centre of a kingdom/empire in a Mediterranean climate and a cultural pinnacle of the area. Now, historically, we know that ancient Rome was the same, so was Constantinople. We know also that Lossarnoch in the south of Gondor was mainly used to supply fruit to Minas Tirith. It had massive apple orchards, but it also corresponds and is influenced by Assisi in Italy. Tolkien himself said this, right? So we're still in the right climate for like a Mediterranean type hot climate, ancient peak of civilization, right?
Yeah.
So in Lord of the Rings, the word marble appears 7 times. And I'm going to tell you...
Those 7 times?
No, because one of them's Gimli talking about the glittering caves at Helm's Deep. But in Lord of the Rings, the roads of Gondor are specifically said to be marble. Okay? Plus, in the throne room, they use black marble for the statue of ancient kings, the Avenue of Kings. The throne canopy is made of marble shaped like a crowned helm. Then in the houses of the dead, the benches where the bodies are laid on are made of marble. It's where Denethor takes Faramir. Theoden was also laid to rest on one of these as well. When Aragorn is made king, there is a summary paragraph I'll read. In his time, the city was made more fair than it had ever been, even in the days of its first glory, and it was filled with trees and fountains, and its gates were wrought of mithril and steel, and its streets were paved with white marble, and the folk of the mountain laboured in it, and the folk of the wood rejoiced to come there, and all was healed and made good, and the houses were filled with men and women and the laughter of children, and no window was blind, nor any courtyard empty, and after the ending of the third age, the world into a new age, it preserved the memory and the glory of the years that were gone. Then, we've got marble roads. We've also finally got the walls of Minas Ithil, which is the twin city of Minas Tirith, is also said to have walls of marble, according to the chapter The Stairs of Cirith Ungol in Lord of the Rings, right? However, the outer walls of Minas Tirith, despite the film making them look white, they're actually black, I believe, which are made of the same smooth black stone that Orthanc was made out of. So, Peter Jackson just made a choice there that there should be white walls instead of black, right?
So may I ask, where's this marble coming from?
The quarry. That's why I'm giving you my evidence as to why, not only what the quarry was for, but why it would have been forgotten. Because once you had all the marble you could, and you've built all these fantastic things.
What else are you going to make out of marble?
The thing is, Lord of the Rings is a post-apocalyptic story. It is a world already in decline. The glory days are long past, and that you've had no need to build massive monuments out of marble.
You can't afford it anymore.
Exactly. So that's why I think it's marble. So I definitely think I definitely think the quarry was for marble rather than anything else. And when they were done, it's forgotten over time, right? Because Gondor was going to build an entire road, a massive straight road. They're building a massive, beautiful city, then forget about it. It was probably because they took all the marble they needed or could from Min Rimon, which it's almost the amount it comes up. It seems like it's almost like a whole fucking mountain's worth of marble. So I'm surprised that the mountain's still fucking standing, with the amount they seem to take for it. But then, of course, it brings us on to the mysterious Black Stone. And this is interesting because it's a Middle-earth mystery, this one.
Obsidian.
That is one of the popular theories, but I don't think so. I think it's just forgotten to time. And I think, it was knowledge brought by the Númenóreans, but it was then forgotten by them and it wasn't replicable.
Might be Whippy Jet.
But it's an interesting parallel, though, to what was ancient Roman concrete. However, while researching this episode, I think last year, I think they actually figured out why Roman concrete was so durable. But for the longest time, we were very confused as a civilization, weren't we, as to why Roman concrete was still standing. And I think that was the parallel. Was that you have these ancient structures that no one can replicate, no one can figure out how they were built, but they're just there. And anyway, it turns out with Roman concrete in our world, there was something called limeclasts or something, which gives the concrete the ability to heal itself, which is pretty cool. But anyway, back to fictional stones. So some people speculate that the Black Stone was obsidian, like you've said, but I like to think of it as Roman concrete because it matches that theme of forgotten knowledge and post-apocalyptic stuff. But anyway, back to the Stormwain Valley and the Drúedain, right? By the time of the War of the Ring, the road was overgrown and forgotten except by the Drúedain, who came in clutch with their knowledge and just wanting to do the right thing. The valley seemed to have some significance because it has names in Sindarin, in Quenya, and Westron, and in Rohanese. So in Quenyan it was Nand Ondolunkava or Ondolunkanovando. In Sindarin there was three names for it: Nan Gondorezigion, another was Tum Gondregan, which it means it may have some water in the valley because it's noted by elves that the word Gondrand was used to describe it, and in Sindarin the word rant it describes the course of a river. It's a very specific word, and we see it pop up once more in the Celebrant, which is the Silverlord River, and that is the river that flows through Lothlorien. So we know that in Sindarin you have the first bit, if it's followed by rant, it's describing the course of a river, so we might call it the Way Rant or the Time Rant, and it'd be you're describing the course that the river takes. It's so fucking nerdy. In the last form of Sindarin was Imrath Gondrek, and Imrath was a long, narrow valley with a road or watercourse running through it. And then in Rohanese, which has got the Old English thing for us, Stan Vagnardale, which is very interesting. Cool, but there's a lot of fucking names for a forgotten valley that shows up in one chapter and never again. I was going a bit mad with the deep dive on that one. I had no idea why, but I couldn't come out of it. I couldn't give it up. I was chasing it to the end. But anyway, back to the Drúedain forest. Right, it was pine, lots of pine trees, and I don't know if anyone was listening. If anyone who's listening can't imagine a pine tree, and if you can't, we know you're an alien. We've tracked your location. We'll be there to pick you up. We've caught you. But pine trees are tall, right? Generally quite thin, but because of their leaves being so like bristly, it blocks out a lot of light from above. So it could get a bit spooky. Like, it could be quite a spooky forest, right? So imagine. So the Drúedain forest, you've got the road to the north, where you've got to walk along or you've got to ride along, or whatever, to get between Gondor and Rohan. You're going along, night's just falling, full moon though, but it's very foggy, and you're going along that road and everything's utterly silent, but you think that, you hear something off to your left. You look into the trees, and all you see is the fog. Or maybe is that someone peeking out from behind the trees, that glint of red eyes. What is that? Is that like a rustling of pine leaves you hear? Is that a figure running between the trees?
The pine needles.
Is that pine needles? Yeah. What is that? Can you hear a shrill whistle far off in the distance, maybe? Ooh. Who knows? But you better hurry home. So it's no surprise, right, that the forest was avoided because Gondorians and the Rohirrim thought it was haunted. And that wasn't true. It was just the Drúedain lived there. And by the end of the Third Age, the Drúedain forest was their most well-known hideout, but it wasn't their only one. There is another one that is completely neglected, but also has some significance, which is Drúedain, which in Sindarin means former land of the wild folk, which is far west of Gondor in a bit of no man's land, except for the Drúedain. Because there was more woods here at the edge of the mountain, the White Mountains, and this place was also called the Old Pukul Wilderness, or Old Pukul Land. And it seemed to be the best place for the Drúedain, in my opinion, right? Because it was so far west that the Númenóreans never occupied it. It was never considered part of Gondor, and the Rohirrim never fucking visited it. They didn't give a shit. So I think, basically, the biggest issue might be the Dunlendings, but we've also saw the Dunlendings didn't want to cross the river because they were scared of them anyway. So, like, this seems like the perfect place for the Drúedain to live. Like, I think they'd be better off just staying there. But the ones that lived here, the reason they're important is that there was a battle at the Fords of Isen, which is the crossing into Rohan, and that's where Theoden's son dies. Or he gets struck down. But anyway, when Saruman's forces are driven back from the Fords of Isen, it's these Drúedain that come out of the forests to attack what's left of Saruman's army. So they're offering some aid. Like, there's less reinforcements to go to places like Helm's Deep and stuff like that. Like, so the Drúedain they were helping out behind the scenes in War of the Ring. It's pretty fucking cool. But then we're coming towards the end of this now, which is interesting. An hour and 20 minutes. I thought it would go longer than this, but it is what it is. So at the end of the War of the Ring, in recognition of their service, especially like what Gambarigan and his tribe did, Aragorn granted the Drúedain forest to the Drúedain forever, in the same way that the Shire is just like theirs to do with whatever forever.
Yeah.
That nobody was able to enter the forest without the Drúedain's permission. And it also
finally some peace and quiet.
Finally, they said like the wild men want to go back to sleep in the woods, and it said that they also seem to have a lasting peace with the Rohirrim as well. Because obviously previously they seem to have been a bit shit to them. But that's it. Like that's it for the Third Age of the Drúedain, because there's no real mention of them afterwards. So I think canonically, if we take what we talked about at the beginning, I think what happened was after the War of the Ring, they went back into their forest, and eventually they started to spread as the world changed. And by the time 6,000-7,000 years later, you get to our medieval time, and they're still kicking about in forests, and we see them, they put them in heraldry, but we've forgotten most of the stuff. We forgot about the history of how they helped in the War of the Ring. We've forgotten all about the War of the Ring. We now just have our quote-unquote real-world history, and we start hearing stories about them again as we hear them on the heraldry. And then eventually someone writes Stig of the Dump. And that's the last... But no, that's it for the... That's the Drúedain. That was a fucking chonker of one to research, that one. There's a lot of episodes, I think, where I do a fair amount of research, but then it generates a lot of discussion, and me and you like talk it out, and you know, that like puts it at a...
They seem just really straightforward, to be honest.
Yeah, there's a far more there than I thought.
I don't see them as no threat, just leave them there.
Yeah. There was other things that I didn't mention that it's quite interesting, is that like they use poison darts and stuff like that. Like they are silent, so like there's references to them like using like blow darts and stuff, which is a pretty cool way to fight. It said apart from orcs, they are the only ones who fight with poison, which is interesting, because I think some people saw it as like dishonourable, but
no, if you've got a vast knowledge of herbology,
yeah, like
might as well use it.
Yeah, like the elves, like they're ride or die for the Drúedain, because they love them. Like once they realise how much they hated orcs, they're like, oh, fucking great, love them. That's awesome. Like,
and I mean, most likely, they would be people who live in harmony with nature in the world that, like, the Maya and stuff are protecting. So, yeah, what would your problem be?
Yeah, no.
It's like all these tribes people that like live in the Amazon. They have like a good mutual relationship with the nature and the plants and animals around them, that they're not really an issue till we start fucking things up and building logger roads and things.
Yeah, they just want to be left alone. That's all they've ever wanted throughout their history, is just to be left alone.
Yeah,
I can respect that. I want that all the time. I just want to be left alone as well.
You are left alone?
Yeah, I know. I mean,
all of the time?
Yeah, I just mean collectively.
I just get asked to play with dinosaurs all the time.
Our daughter's going through a dinosaur phase at the moment. It's fucking adorable, but it's also like...
From the moment I wake
it's
to the moment I shut my eyes.
She's absolutely class, like, but like, it's in the moment you're just like...
I don't want to be a mummy T-Rex anymore.
Yeah.
I want to be a Drúedain. Or a Dynodont.
Aye. Oh, but yeah, that was it. I'm glad to be back. I need to get back into the rhythm of researching again. I'm going to have a go at magic next, I think. I don't know how that one's going to pan out. It might be a massive one. It might not be. Who knows?
Sounds like it's going to be humongous.
Yeah, probably. It's just because Tolkien makes he distinguishes between miraculous acts and magical acts. So it'd be to be honest, I think half of it will be the worst part will be trying to pin down a fucking definition of magic in Tolkien. It's just anyway. If I give up with that one, I might just do fucking fuck, marry, kill again. I was talking to Kat today actually, and I was saying that like I'll just show you pictures of all 12 dwarves and just do fuck, marry, kill. Like
rank them.
What order? Who goes where on the fuck pile? So when I in one of my D&D games with my D&D group, we had a campaign where I played a halfling, and he was called Albert. And we've actually kind of suspended.
I remember that character.
We've suspended that campaign because we were going to do something that was going to change the world, so we had to stop so that our DM could figure out what to do. And that was like a couple of years ago, and we've done like other campaigns in between. But it became canon in that world from a joke that I made, is that hobbits had so many kids, and it was like communal living, that I then joked that it's communal living because hobbits reproduce by every 6 months they have a fuck pile. And that's how hobbits reproduce. So every now and then, like every time we meet a halfling in any one of the campaigns where our DM is, there'll be some reference to like hobbits being on fuck piles.
Filth.
Yeah. Well, I actually heard a theory. This is a meme the other day that it was fucking hilarious. It got passed around like a few like talking groups. Was the theory that the Shire is so confusing to navigate because they're just trying to keep Gandalf out. But then someone went a bit further and was that, isn't it strange that Gandalf's always like quite protective or quite interested in the Tooks, in like their lineage.
Yeah.
Like Bilbo has a Tookish side, Frodo's descended from the Tooks. Like Peregrine Took is looked after in like a grandfatherly kind of way. And then someone was saying, like, what if Gandalf fucked a hobbit?
Yeah.
Like, and now it's his, like,
he feels like he's got to do some sort of duty.
Yeah, his descendants that, like, and then
he's just like, I smoked a lot of that.
That fucking old Toby. So
that was a wild night.
Yeah. So then I took it to where it shouldn't have went, and I combined this, and I said the Shire is so confusing to navigate because they're trying to stop Gandalf fucking them. And they're trying to hide it with like increasingly complex roads. But then I also took it a step further and said I combined all these theories into this one master theory, which is just very bad, is that the Shire is very complex to navigate because they're trying to stop Gandalf from fucking them. Because hobbits are so racist, they hate the thought of race mixing. And I just...
and that's it from...
That killed the conversation.
Christopher.
That killed the conversation in the Discord, to be honest. I thought it was fucking hilarious. Like, the idea, like, the belt and braces is, like, one step away from, like, the belt and braces, hobbit skinheads.
I think it might be bad timing.
Because they've already... Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was, actually, after... Yeah, so if anyone who's not aware, in the UK, we were... It's fucking disgusting, actually. We've had a lot of riots recently, where it's just become an excuse to
hooligans
to go for brown people, essentially. Like, that's as simple as it is. It's to the point where my place at work, because I work in Newcastle City now, so I've changed jobs, as opposed to Edinburgh, they emailed us saying just don't go in. Because like there's riots and stuff like that. And, like,
I saw a really nice sign and it said, Newcastle with black, white, and brown.
Yeah, like it's good because
on some clever.
Yesterday there was a peaceful protest
that
was praised for how well they handled it. Like, absolutely, like, yeah, like it's fucking disgusting that there was these poor little girls that got killed by a black lad, right? And he wasn't a Muslim, as far as you could tell. His family were Christian. He was born in Cardiff or Wales. He was born in Wales, whatever. But it quickly became like this misinformation thing that he was a Muslim immigrant, and then that was just all the excuse that a lot of some very racist people needed. And what you see as well is, like, I've seen this before, in my opinion, is that you only have a few who are like really fucking hardcore racist, but then you've got a few more who are quite, might be a bit racist, but they see other people acting on it and they're quite easily led, and that it's easy, and that's even more dangerous because you can whip people like that up into a frenzy, and that's what we've seen with like fucking Greg's getting looted and stuff like that. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Like, I hope the thick cunts who were part of it do go to jail. Like, they are need to be made an example of. It's just, it's fucking ridiculous. But then again, that's why I said when I started this podcast, is like, what the fuck's going on with the world that I'm diving into a fantasy history this deeply? I'm just going to get deeper. Like, the more that goes on, yeah.
As our world declines, I'm going to throw myself further into a fictional world.
Yeah, there's things I'm doing in my local community to try and make things better, and like that's why a lot of my time's going, is that I'm setting up projects and stuff like that. But there's only so much one person can do, isn't it? Anyway, I don't know where we got here, but it's just nice to be back. I think it's just nice to talk.
I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, good. Right, so next time you see someone with short legs,
red eyes.
If you see someone with a flat nose, a wide face, a fat ass,
Cackling.
and short, stubby legs, go up to them and say, Drúedain, gan buri gan. Don't do that if they're not white, actually. That could be really fucking bad. Don't do it if they're not white and they don't look like they... Don't do it if they're not white or if they don't look like they can take a joke.
Just don't do it at all.
Don't do that voice, actually.
Just don't do it. Don't even walk up to anyone.
Don't do it
It's
if
not safe anymore.
Don't do it if they're obviously already a little person. Because that's...
Just don't look anyone square in the eyes.
Don't do it to a non-white little person. That's probably the worst. But avoid that one. Avoid that type of person entirely. Don't do that. But anyone else who's got a big ass, if they've got a Lord of the Rings t-shirt on, you can do it. What's the criteria here? Who can I go up to in the street and shout?
A Lord of the Rings convention.
Gan buddy gan.
Just Lord of the Rings convention. You're in the building. Everyone is in costume. That is Lord of the Rings.
Anyone who's got short legs and a fat ass, walk up to them and say, "When are you going back to the forest?" Yeah, that'll work.
And said,
when,
and just say, Chris told me to do that. Okay, it'll be fine.
To be fair, the people who listen to this podcast,
they've not got to this point now.
Well,
they've already gone to sleep.
I don't know.
Most of our listeners just use us to fall asleep too, don't they?
The toddlers do. A lot of this. A lot of our listeners are very intelligent people. In fact, I've not talked to anyone who's a thick cunt, to be honest. There's that weird guy who keeps popping up about the glue trap, but he's not unintelligent because he keeps fucking coming back in different disguises. He keeps luring me. But no, generally, I've not talked to anybody who've listened to this podcast and thought, "Oh, you're a thick bastard." I mean, I'm sure people have thought that about me, but I'm the one with the microphone.
I feel like I'm bottom of the pile.
You're not.
Just from memory, I'm not great at remembering a lot of things.
You've got a year and a half of me injecting concentrated talking into your veins. I think you.
But we've had a break, so
my
far more. Brain might have wiped.
You know far more than the average person, which I think you're selling yourself short there. I think coming up as well, we're going to do. I'll be meaning to talk to you about this. I thought about doing a drunk watch of the Hobbit films. I thought it could be quite nice.
Oh, yeah, I love the Hobbit.
We'd have to space it out though, because I'm not doing fucking 3 weeks of 3 extended editions. That's just fucking torture. Unless your mum can have the kid. Yeah. Blech. The idea, that's where we're at as parents, right? We're at the thought of watching a film that's too long is painful. Because we're so fucking tired. Just the idea. Yeah,
and we have to sit. We cannot lay in bed and watch a film. We have to sit and watch it.
Yes, because I don't trust you watching a film in bed. I just don't. That's why I'll make you sit downstairs. That's why I've been buying.
I'm chained.
That's why I bought snacks
to the sofa.
That's why I bought snacks. Is because I'll lead you down. I'm like an old school pedo. I'll lead you into the front room with snacks. Because that's how I know I can keep you down there. It's fucking true though.
It's not true.
It is true.
It's not.
It is true.
I'll have a glass of wine. I'm fine.
I need you set up like Jabba the Hutt. I need you sat like Jabba in his palace. That's how I know you can get you down for a film. So if I put you in bed, you just roll over and go to sleep and start farting. That's exactly how it goes. Oh, right, we're rambling. This isn't even about Lord of the Rings anymore. Yeah, okay. Give us any feedback that's positive and spare my feelings. No, I'm joking. This episode should be out within a couple of days of me recording it. I'm probably going to have to edit it tomorrow. It's too late now. But yeah, no, it's good to be back. Thanks for listening. Hopefully there's not that long of a break. But if there is, you're going to have to deal with it. But by the time there is more of a break, you'll have more episodes to come back and listen to. So there'll be a bigger backlog. That'll be interesting, actually. I've not even looked at any of the analytics for ages. So I don't know if people are even going back and watch other episodes. But I know people are still thinking of us because someone had tagged me in a meme just as we'd start, in their story just as we'd start recording saying, I'm checking Spotify every day. Where the fuck are you?
Yeah, you were the one who got us out of bed.
No. Oh, was it?
You got me out of bed. Because I was like, yeah, good point.
Oh,
I keep telling you that we need to record.
Yeah, true. Right, anyway, okay, look out for a magic episode or look out for a Fuck, Marry, Kill after this one's already out, but listen to this one first. And if you got this far...
Woo! Celebrate!
Well, it's 95 minutes. It's not that big of an ask, is it? I listened to those conspiracy guys when they first came out. Their episodes were like 6 hours long.
Really?
I miss podcasts like that. I miss 6-hour podcasts.
I mean, we could do a 6-hour podcast, but it would literally just be us talking like this.
Yeah, there was one about Hitler, Nazism and the occult. That was fucking amazing. And there was one about Hollow Earth. Like, it's fascinating just to hear the origins of these theories and how they evolved and stuff like that. It was when I lived in Poland. I used to listen to like 6-hour podcasts.
Did you drink Suplica then?
Maybe, I don't know.
So yeah, shout out to Alex.
Yeah,
who
for the
supplied the Suplica.
Well, no, she's gone back to Poland now. So
we'll have to visit.
Well, I did want to go and visit because I wanted to go to those mountains I showed you.
So we'll have to visit you now you're in Poland, and we will have to drink Suplica together.
Right, okay. Now, with that one, we're going to sign off because it's bedtime and I'm in the office tomorrow. So, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later. Bye.
Bye.